Welcome to the Thrive in Design podcast, the show for interior product brands ready to turn insight into action. I'm your host, Nicole Lashae Hall, founder of Thrive in Design. Each week, we explore how manufacturers, marketers, and sales leaders can align strategy, storytelling, and systems to drive real specification growth. This podcast is about moving beyond scattered marketing, outdated sales tactics, and visibility for visibility's sake, and into clarity, alignment, and momentum. Whether you're navigating change, scaling thoughtfully, or rethinking how your brand shows up in the design industry, you're in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Thrive in Design podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Lashae Hall, CEO and founder of Thrive in Design, where we help interior product companies grow their brand and revenue through human-centered strategy and design. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Amanda Schneider, founder and president of ThinkLab, the only research organization dedicated exclusively to the built environment and the interior design industry. Amanda is a leading voice in design research, helping brands understand where the industry is headed and how to build products and cultures that truly resonate with designers. With features in Forbes, MIT Sloan Management Review, Interior Design, Metropolis, and more, Amanda's work bridges research, business strategy, and the future of work. She's a TED.com speaker, host of the Top 1% podcast, Design Nerds Anonymous, and the author of the new book, Work for What's Next, where she explores how work, culture, and space are evolving together. In today's episode, we'll dive into what it takes to build a purpose-driven product brand that designers genuinely love, how research can inform smarter brand decisions, and why aligning purpose, culture, and product is no longer optional in today's market. This conversation is packed with insight for product leaders and design brands alike. So let's get started. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here today to talk about all the things from your evolution of ThinkLab and really why you founded it to some real research that people can take away from today and apply it to their brands. So let's get started on just like the story of ThinkLab. You have built this trusted platform to designers, manufacturers, and brands alike. So walk us through how ThinkLab evolved from its early days into what it is today.
Awesome. So I like to say my brief bio is I'm a designer by degree, a journalist by accident, and a researcher by choice. So let me unpack that a little bit. So I'm a product designer by background. That's really where the foundations of what has become ThinkLab came from. So graduated from University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, grew up on the contract furniture side of this. Actually, first decade of my career was with All Steel, a furniture brand that probably a lot of your listeners know and love. And then I went back to school, got my MBA in marketing, and that's really where kind of this blend of business and research started. And I stumbled into the world of journalism, first with the Huffington Post, and later as I sold my business with the acquisition of Sandow, which is one of the largest media brands, actually I would say the largest media brand in the interior design industry. And that is where I really started to kind of expand and scale this mindset. So the bulk of it is starting in the contract furniture world, I saw a huge gap in how product brands look at product launches getting discovered and what interior design needed. So between industrial design and interior design, there was kind of this gap. So I started a company that was really focused on helping bridge that gap and understand what product companies could do to better serve designers. So the average designer has 40 times the recommendation power as the average American consumer. And when you get into the interior design giants of design, which is like the Fortune 500, but for interiors firms, if you're not familiar with it, a study that's been done for over 40 years, long before my tenure, by Interior Design Magazine, those interior design giants of design have on average, top 200 firms, 140 times the recommendation power that the average American consumer has. And if you get into the top 25, the top 10, it's even more powerful. So to me, that says why this work matters and why the product side of the industry should really care what these designers think. Because even if they're not calling directly on interior designers, maybe that's not part of your business, you're more distributor focused, maybe you're going directly to end users. These designers are really passionate about product. And they're really focused on what trends they're seeing, what comes next. So they love to share their feedback. So I say, even if you're not focused on harnessing that power for your brand, it's a really great place to look to really understand what's next.
Yeah, I love that you broke it down into the data behind that, because I feel like a lot of time in our industry, people see that designers have an impact. But when you break it down in those numbers, like 40 times more impact or 140 times more impact when it comes to the design giants, it really hits home. Like, okay, this is important. We
It's
need to focus
impactful.
here.
Well, and especially
Yeah.
as we've scaled as part of Standout, we've seen it where we have consumer brands coming to us that have accidental success with professional designers trying to understand that. So we
Yeah.
saw it in our research before we could even quantify it. So quantifying it is just a really fun way to really put some meat behind why this whole industry matters.
Yeah. And so let's talk about, okay, you started in industrial design, you went back to school for your MBA, you started this company, you sold it. And so how has your vision for ThinkLab kind of adapted along the way? Like, what are you guys up to now? What are your main things?
Yeah, I would say it has definitely evolved a lot in ways I never could have imagined. And if you listen to my TED Talk, you'll hear kind of the founding story behind what became ThinkLab. It was really driven by my personal desire to explore new ways of working. In that talk, I talk about my own what's the point moment. I am a proud mom of 3 boys.
Love
And
it.
as I had my second son in 2011, it just became abundantly clear that the traditional working path was not fitting where I needed to be for my family. But at that time, as a working mom, I felt like your choice was work full time by rules created for a world when women didn't work, if we're honest, right? Like 9 to 5 assumes kind of a stay at home caregiver or someone else to take care of your children. So
Hmm.
stay in this working world or be a stay at home mom. And I didn't really like either of those. I love working. I love my job. I have a huge passion for what I do. I love my kids, but I don't want to do one without the other. And so honestly, in 2011, when I started this company, it was just me. If I'm honest, I really thought I was flushing my career down the toilet, but the business grew. There was a demand for it. There was a need for it. And the business grew faster than I was able to support it. So in 2015, we incorporated as contract consulting group, and I started inviting other mothers who had left the workforce for one reason or another, the traditional workforce, and they joined me. And this powerful group of mamas, we doubled our business year over year, 3 years running, till ultimately we were discovered by Sandow Interior Design Magazine in 2018, who ended up acquiring the business. So since then, we've been scaling. I would say my 2019 to 2026 phrase is all around scaling and really figuring out different ways to serve the market, really different ways to educate on why research, different ways to kind of bring what we do to the broader world. And I will say, culminating with this new book, which I'm so excited about, titled Work for What's Next, because in that scaling period between 2019 to 2026, a lot happened, right? Pandemic
Yeah.
happened, Gen Z started entering the workforce, and we've done very deep studies on Gen Z. And as we studied Gen Z, what I discovered is like, holy cow, what they are asking for is not unlike what I wanted when I felt like I had this binary choice. And not
Yeah.
only did we test and iterate on some of these ideas, but we proved success by the selling of the business, by the scaling of the business, still under the Sandow umbrella. So I'm super excited to bring our research on Gen Z combined with my personal experiences to the world. And I feel like it's just a really good template and guide for companies that are bold enough to really try to reimagine work for what's next.
Yeah, I love that you shared that little tidbit about just like being a working mom, because I personally can relate. I have 2 sons now and a bonus daughter, which is completely different from just like 9 years ago. And I can totally relate to that. It's like I have this passion about the design industry and what I want to do, but I also want this flexibility. Like I want to be in the carpool line on some days, or there for my family in the way that I support. So I love that you were, before the Gen Z was coming in the workforce, already thinking like, okay, how can I reinvent what work looks like for myself and then for my team? And now how can we translate that so that other companies can adopt a model that works for them and their employees as well? So let's get into a little bit about the state of the industry, because I see you guys putting out state of the industry reports every year. And I'm always like, when is it coming out? I want to see what the research is saying. So one, that I can understand, and then two, I can also help my clients. So as you guys are coming up with these reports and sitting at the intersection of research and design leadership and manufacturing, can you summarize for me what we should know heading into 2026 that is fundamentally different from maybe like 5 years ago?
Mm-hmm. One thing I like to say is I think our industry has seen more change in the past 10 years, probably than in the last 50, right? If I had to kind of quantify this. So let me just give you kind of 3 quick things that summarize maybe what the 3 biggest impacts are in terms of how people need to think differently. So I would say the first one, and let me preface this also by saying, I think the pandemic was a huge shift, not only for our industry, but really our world, right? And while some of those things may rebalance, we can't go backwards, but we can't quite see what a better future is yet, right? So I think we're in this time of a little bit of purgatory, if you will, like a little bit of time that we're trying to figure that out. So here are the 3 places I guess I would say to focus on if we really want to look at what shifted from now versus 3 years ago. The first one is I think there's a big change in balance between sales and marketing. And most brands in our industry have not figured this out yet. Hybrid work really changed a lot for both sellers and marketers in this industry. And I want to speak specifically to sellers and marketers, though I know there's a lot more important people in that process, the people that do manufacturing, the people that do engineering and all of this. But the sales and marketing are really on that upfront discovery phase. So if we don't have that upfront discovery, they don't know about your brand, they don't know about your product, then none of those other people down the chain are going to have jobs. So let's focus there. So put succinctly, today sellers have twice the number of decision makers on a project. That has to do with risk aversion and a lot more things we've been covering in our research. Yet with hybrid work, they have half the face time that they used to. So that is fundamentally disrupting kind of what I call the unwritten norms of how B2B relationships are developed. We talk about this a lot in the book as we kind of translate this, but it's also really influenced kind of these unwritten norms of selling. If you think about it, Gen Z entered the workforce in 2019, just pre-pandemic. They have never known, as one Gen Zer called it in a podcast interview with us, they've never known the before.
That's true.
The people who existed in this industry and grew up pre-2019 versus those who started in 2019 have vastly different mental operating systems. And we have not yet figured out how to blend those. And the answer lies in really looking at this balance between sales and marketing. So a lot of our 2026 initiatives are workshops and things that help people really figure that out, because there needs to be some testing and iteration to get to a better spot. The second one is a little bit more depressing. So bear with me, buckle up here. But I would say the biggest shift that we've seen in recent years at this industry is showing signs of maturity and decline. If you think about it in your MBA programs, you probably saw the chart that is, the life cycle of a company. And when we start seeing major companies acquire other major companies, which we have seen, especially in the furniture sector, it's a sign of maturity and even decline as an industry. You add to that kind of the corporate function, which historically has been the largest sector of our industry in terms of fees earned by these 200 interior design giants of design, has kind of seen an upset and decline. We have brand new information in that actually has not been published yet at the time of recording that says from 2019 until the actual numbers that came in 2025, that corporate sector has seen a 20% decline, meaning the fees an interior design firm earned pre-pandemic 2019, which was the peak of the market before, has actually fallen 20% when compared to 2025 actuals. Now, there's still growth in other sectors. Corporate has just struggled a little bit, but that's where a lot of our core function has been around, and there's a lot of change happening. So that decline has really kind of I think shifted a lot that we're talking about as well. So number 2 is the showing signs of maturity and even decline, which there's a lot to unpack there. We probably won't get to today, but love to geek out over it. And the third one is a little more positive. So I'm going to leave you a little bit more positivity here, which is, I think, a really positive moment for our industry. That coming out of the pandemic, the average human has never been more aware of how they feel in physical space. For me, this has been proven by, viral articles that we've written in Forbes, MIT Sloan Management Review. My TEDx talk, getting pulled to go to TED, now has 500,000 views. I've been writing about this shit for a long. Can I say shit on your podcast?
Yes, we'll just make it.
All right.
We'll tag it as that.
Okay. I've been writing about this stuff for a long time, originally with the Huffington Post, and nothing I've written has ever gone viral. But, starting in 2022, 2023, 2024, now 2025, and hopefully with this book in 2026, we'll see where it goes. I think it says that the stuff this industry has been thinking about for a long time, when that physical space was taken away from them, all of a sudden, the average human is like, holy crap, this is really important. It's why you see so many more people involved in this RTO conversation and what's happening there. So, while there's been maybe some historical misconception about even what an interior designer is or what they do, and certainly for any of us that have been in this weird underground world of furniture for the start to our career, like I was, trying to explain what you do at a family reunion, people are like, what? That exists? Like, it's this weird underground world. And I think this is a really beautiful moment in time for our industry to be heard and step up. So I think that that's what's really exciting for me in the role that I'm in right now, especially with the launch of this book that is not just for our industry, but really for the world, is I want to amplify those voices, not just to our own industry echo chamber that we can sometimes get stuck in, but really to the world. Because unfortunately, being part of media companies, I can tell you sometimes it tends to be the loudest voices and not the most thoughtful that are heard. Even on social media, you see this happening. So I'm super excited and hopeful that this gives our industry a moment to step up and really help our world kind of figure out what's next.
Yeah. Okay. So you said so many things there. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to dive into one.
Yeah, let's do it.
As a follow-up question. Balance in sales and marketing, right?
Okay.
And I am really passionate about this topic because as somebody who has worked for manufacturers, and now I work with manufacturers, just helping them on the marketing side, I have witnessed this shift, right? I have seen that a lot of the times sales and marketing, whether that be a company that has both of those teams in-house, or maybe they outsource something, they might have independent reps or a marketing agency, whatever. All those two groups typically are working in silos, right? We went into the pandemic, things got shaken up, and still we're post-pandemic and people still don't know how to work. So what does that mean exactly for 2026? What should balance between sales and marketing look like? Like, what should be the next step, Amanda? We need some guidance.
Well, as you know, if this was like explainable in 30 seconds or less, I would be very rich. You and I both would be on some yacht somewhere and not, talking on a podcast. But let me do my best to condense it down. I will say there's some really interesting B2B research out of Forrester. I love watching Forrester, McKinsey, Gartner, Accenture, like all of these, because our industry tends to be a little bit behind a lot of other B2B industries. We are like big complex sales, right? We're not a big industry, but the sales are big dollar amounts and they're very, very complex.
Sure.
So it takes a little longer for that change to happen. But what's so interesting about this Forrester research, and you can Google it, you can probably find it, is they talk about how sales and marketing need to align better than ever before. It used to be really clear, marketing does this, sales does that. Now, marketing sends emails. Guess what? Sales also sends emails. Like marketing does social media on behalf of the brand, but a lot of local sales teams now are doing social media. And when we look at the overwhelm, we're going to probably talk before we're off this podcast about burnout and how that's showing up in our research. But when all of our audiences are being hit with more messages, more information than ever before, what hurts your brand is having these overlapping, or worse yet, conflicting messages. So this Forrester research talks about how 82% of B2B C-suite execs feel that their sales, marketing, and product development are aligned. But as you go down from that C-suite to the people, feet on the street that are actually doing this work, only 35% of the sales, marketing, and product teams, the people doing the work, feel that they're aligned. So, this is where we're developing a new accelerator workshop in 2026 to really help brands kind of dive into the so what of this and kind of figure out, what do you need to do? What do they need to do? Because I think our industry has continued working in those silos. I think we are woefully behind on a lot of digital tools, but the bigger issue than creating great digital tools, still an issue. The bigger issue is figuring out how to pair our human capital with that digital capital in behavioral changes.
If recent changes left you feeling like the ground shifted under your feet, this matters. The industry didn't just evolve, the systems changed. The AI in Design Summit was created to help brands recalibrate with practical, business-aligned insight into how AI and strategy are actually being used across architecture and design today. And once you have that context, Spec Ready helps you assess where your brand stands and what needs to be in place to move forward with confidence and consistency. That's tidsummit.com and specready.co. Do you find that those brands that are still working in silos, is leadership, do you see leadership saying like, oh, okay, we see a problem here that we are working in silos? Do they want to change? Do you feel like there's a need and a desire for change right now? Or are people still like, we're just going to do what we've been doing?
I feel like there is definitely an appetite for change.
Okay.
And we have some ways that we kind of, one of our jokes is be the neck that turns the head. If I go in there and wag my finger, they're never going to what do you know? You're not running a company. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. But what we do is we use research in a way. It's a line from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which is the man, he is the head of the household, but the woman, she is the neck, and the neck can turn the head. So we try to use research to be the neck that turns the head. And so what we do is we pull their leaders, we pull their sales, marketing, product people. Sometimes we do live polling in these workshops to really kind of show them, like, that's what your team said. You're not really aligned here. Be the neck that turns the head to help them see that. In my experience, most brands realize there's a disconnect. Most people want to change. Most are struggling to find the time, focus, and best next steps to actually make it happen.
Yeah. And so with that limitation of time and not knowing the best next steps, what should a brand do then?
Goodness, this is a hard one to say because everyone wants the Ozempic, right? Nobody wants the diet and exercise plan. That sounds hard and I'm going to have to sweat and I'm not going to be able to eat that cheeseburger, right? But I don't think there's a shortcut to this. To me, there's no magical 3-step checklist that I can say, do A, B, and C, and you will see results. There are certainly best practices that we see regularly in our research. We're happy to help walk people through, but it is going to be a really hard diet and exercise plan, and the companies that put in the work now are going to be the ones that come out ahead.
Yeah.
And I think I would say, as we look at that maturity curve, as we look at that growth, stability, and decline, as the bigs start buying bigs, now is the time that these companies need to start to figure this out and need to innovate, because that is the phase in any company and any industry growth cycle when they are most vulnerable to disruption.
Yeah.
So our choices, every single brand's choice is this, not just our choice as an industry. Every single product brand's choice is this. You either start to disrupt your own self and the way things have always been done, or you will be disrupted. It may not be tomorrow, but it's coming if we're not laying the foundation now.
Yeah. And I think in either one of those scenarios, whether you're deciding to create the disruption and be innovative yourself, or the disruption just happens and you're reacting to create innovation, either one is like a long game, right? Because you said just now, there's not this like magical 3-step checklist where you're going to do these things and you're going to experience change overnight. No matter what, it's going to be a long game. People need to plan for what does the future look like and not just the future 12 months from now. Because even how you shared that the industry didn't really change for 50 years until we experienced the pandemic, it sounds like we need to be thinking 50 years down the road from what I'm understanding.
And
so I hope, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I hope you come. I'll invite you. I'll invite all your listeners to come. We're giving a keynote specific to manufacturers and dealers and reps. So kind of the product side of the industry at NeoCon 2026.
Awesome.
We've done this the last couple of years, and that's where we'll have an hour together to really kind of share some of this information. It happens the Friday before NeoCon. We serve lunch. So keep an eye out on the NeoCon website as to how to join that. And Nicole, I hope you join us too.
Yes, I hope so. I have to put it on my calendar. I love NeoCon. I've been having a blast every time that I've gone the last few years. So I'm definitely adding that to my calendar for sure. Okay, so before we get into your book, I actually want to talk a little bit about generational gaps in the workplace and what that means for our industry. And Amanda, the funny thing is, like when I was in interior design school, on my senior year, we had to do this project where we had to choose a world issue and then solve it with design. And my world issue was actually generational gaps in the workplace.
Amazing. We'll have to revisit that and check out your portfolio. Now I want to see
I know. I have to find the portfolio project description, but I remember, so that was back in 2011 going into 2012. And at the time I was interning at an architecture firm in Syracuse, New York, while I was working on my interior design degree at Syracuse University. And I just remember being at that firm, like the youngest person. And then there were people like 75, 80 years old and somewhere in between. And I was just looking around like, there's a lot of knowledge here across the generations, but there's not a lot of interactions. I just remember thinking that. And then ultimately that led to me like developing this like concept that would connect people on social media based on their common interest. And then from that connection, they had to like meet up in person in the space that I designed for my senior project. And so because of that, I have always been like generational gaps in the workplace. This is a thing. And it has become a very hot topic in our industry. I've seen IIDA talk about it. I've seen you talk about it. I've seen Tara over at Network Next Gen talk about it.
She's amazing.
It's a buzzing conversation. So let's get into it just a little bit.
Yeah.
About generational disconnects. Like, where are you seeing most clearly those disconnects between decision makers, specifiers, and emerging professionals right now?
Yeah, and I'm going to answer your question, I promise, but I want to kind of back up here for a minute because I think most generational researchers have got it wrong. And here's why. I think if you look at, especially, I'm guessing you're a millennial. You a millennial?
Yes.
Okay.
I am a millennial.
So especially what we did to the millennials, I'm sorry to you and all of your cohort of millennials, because that was really when generational research came out in a big way. And what we did to the millennials is we stereotyped them, which means
very much
somebody else has to give something up for you to get what you want. Like we're so focused on this next generation, we forgot about all you older people. But to your point, one of the most important things that's happening right now is baby boomers are the largest generation. They are retiring at an unprecedented rate. My generation, Gen X, is not big enough to fill their shoes. So that means millennials and Gen Z are having to step up sooner. So this creates kind of a crazy moment in time right now. As a whole, this is not specific to our industry, where we need all of that lived experience, all of that expertise from these older generations that are starting to leave the workforce or at least move into alternate consulting and, kind of one toe in career paths. But we also have to get these next generations ready to step up into these leadership roles sooner. So it's not just about what Gen Z wants. It's really about how to connect these generations across all of their different perceptions and lived experiences. And so I think it's one thing that's really, really different about my book is how we use generational research to solve business problems. We're not necessarily solving for generational problems. We're solving business problems by looking at generational research. And in doing so, rather than stereotyping, which of course we have to group, you got to name it to tame it. So we're grouping these folks and saying, here's what the different ones kind of found. We're looking to Gen Z as prototypes, not stereotypes. When you prototype something, you keep the aspects that work. They've got some really fresh thinking, some really exciting ideas that can solve problems that, to your point, when you enter the workforce, are not necessarily new. But we're going to iterate on the things that don't, because they definitely, like every generation that was 0 to 5 years into their career, definitely don't know everything yet, right? So I guess that's one thing from a broad perspective I wanted to get out there. And The second thing is that generational differences themselves are not new. You talked about when you entered the workforce. But here's what is new. Hybrid work has upended the old playbook, but we don't yet have an agreed upon what's better playbook out there. Technology is racing ahead, but culturally, we're really lagging. It takes a while culturally for us to catch up. Multiple generations are navigating the same industry, the same workplace, but with entirely different mental operating systems. I had a phenomenal guest on my podcast by the name of Hannah Grady-Williams. If you haven't listened to that episode on Design Nerds Anonymous, it's phenomenal. But she talks about how people under 35 naturally operate digital first. Well, those of us, under 30 are digital first, but over 35 naturally operate analog first. So when I say multiple generations are navigating the same industry, the same workplace with different mental operating systems, think about what I talked about earlier, those that entered the industry in 2019 versus those that have been here as long as you and I have, right? Very, very different mental norms. Geography is no longer a boundary. Think about even how our distribution is set up. They're set up like grocery store chains, right? You've got the Northeast, you've got the Southwest, right? But those people in the Southwest are working on projects in the Northeast and vice versa today. We're still set up for geography being a boundary. And the fifth one is that work is no longer confined to a time or place. So as we're working, we can work from anywhere, anytime. We can also work from everywhere all the time. So I think I just want to emphasize that that's why this moment is different. And that is how our generational research is different and kind of why I think this book is going to be different and hopefully a real gift to the world to help us all figure out how to navigate this.
Yeah. And as people are figuring out how to navigate this, actually one thing, because you said under 35 and then over 35. So what about the 35-year-olds? Because I'm 35.
Yeah. So
where do I fall in that?
Yeah. And this is all credit to Hannah Grady-Williams. This is hers from her book, Unlocking Gen Z. So great read. If you haven't read that one, I highly recommend it too. So she says over 35, you are analog first.
Analog first.
If you're under 30, you're digital first. And if you're in the 30 to 35 range, which you are, so if you're in that range, it just depends on how you were raised. It kind of depends on parenting, geography, socioeconomic, like a lot of different things. But she says very clearly, you can emigrate to the other. Just like if I chose to move to Korea, I could emigrate to Korea. I could learn the language. I could learn the cultures. I can emigrate. I'll still naturally be an American native because I was born here, but you can emigrate. So in the same way, you can emigrate from analog first to a digital first, but it requires you to learn new norms, new nuances. And I think those norms and nuances are exactly explaining the struggles that our industry is having today.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Thank you for giving me my little bit of a
You need to know where you
category.
stand. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, where do I stand? But I kind of relate to that. All right. So just wrapping up that point in terms of like generational gaps, there's so much information, there's so much research, but what's one like tidbit that you want brands and design focused brands to really take away in terms of applying that research as a first step?
I mean, I would say if I had one piece of advice for where we are right now to leave your listeners with, I would say we've been so focused on digital tools, hugely important. Very few brands have really nailed those digital tools. But I think back to our sales and marketing alignment, where most brands are missing the boat is that they're not focused enough on the change management and soft skills of their biggest asset, those people. So we definitely had to focus on digital tools, but those digital tools are never going to be adopted if we can't also marry the physical presence of those people, of those sellers in the physical world with how those two things integrate and stop overlapping one another. So my biggest piece of advice is focus on change management of your people and developing what digital tools, computer soft skill, like never will, are those soft skills that your individuals have.
Yeah, I love that. I was just recorded another episode recently, just kind of talking about like training the sales team on storytelling. So that's just a small portion of the soft skills and change management. Because I just remember when I was in sales working for different manufacturers, a lot of times, of course, when sales and marketing was working in silos, marketing was coming up with these stories of the product lines, all of these sales enablement tools, and kind of like handing it off and saying, go meet your sales goal. But there was not a built-in like change management or training or of these soft skills or even around like storytelling for the sales team so that we can be successful. So I think that kind of ties into what you're saying.
I wholly agree. And I think, this is where there's a chapter in the book on communication that talks about communicating in a digital first era, because we can't communicate the way you and I learned to when we first entered this industry, right? But nobody's reframing that for us. The average scroll, someone makes a decision in 1.7 seconds. And guess what? As we get shorter attention spans digitally, when we're online more and more and more, that also translates to how long you have to keep, hold, and garner more of their attention when you're in person. But most sellers are still telling that whole damn story, like from the beginning. I was born on a rainy day in June, right? Like we have to, and this is one of the topics that we're going to get into at that NeoCon keynote, is really helping to reframe our communication for the digital era. So storytelling, hugely important, but even how we tell those stories has got to shift and change as we kind of get into this new era, because our old playbook is not working like it used to. So we got to develop a new one.
I love that. And I didn't even think about how short that decision-making process can be. 1.7 seconds.
That's the scroll. Okay. But if you look at rep presentations, 15 minutes is the new hour. When I was a rep, I think I left my rep role back in, 2011 when I started this. So I was a rep from 2007 to 2011. And I had an hour-long lunch and learn once a month that was pre-scheduled. I could come in and talk about whatever I wanted to, as long as I brought good food. The whole interiors department would show up. They would stay for the whole hour. I could talk about a chair for an hour. Sellers today are not getting that. They're not getting that.
Not at all.
So how do you get them to show up? How do you get them to stay? What's happening more frequently now are these 15-minute walkthroughs where they're in there with 6 other reps. How do you capture their attention? How do you get them interested? How do you make them want to come back to you as a human and connect with you? Because we're seeing a huge disconnect in numbers about Gen Z and their go-to reps. I could turn your head. We got some scary ones that aren't yet released about how these Gen Zers are really struggling to understand the role of the rep, because they were born into this industry when everything was fully digital. So it's really a mind shift for them, but also one that the rest of us can learn from too.
Oh my gosh. I wish we had like 5 hours to continue this conversation, Amanda. So many good things and so much data that I, quite frankly, am obsessed with. And so I can't wait to just continue learning more and hopefully join your NeoCon talk that Friday before it starts. But before we wrap up, I know we've kind of chimed in and talked about your book a little bit throughout this conversation. Is there anything else you want to leave us with of what to look forward to in your book and what you want readers to walk away with?
Yeah, I think, first of all, let me formally invite you and all your listeners, check out the book. It's titled Work for What's Next. The pre-order links are live on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much any book retailer. We published the book with Wiley, the largest publisher. So find it wherever you love to get your books. And I hope that you will join me in reading that. And I will say what I hope you find from reading this book. Adam Grant calls them vu-ja-de moments. It's the opposite of a deja vu. It's seeing something that you've seen a million times, but with fresh eyes. And every time I keynote on this topic, I'm going to be leaving the audience with the question, what is one thing you learned from this presentation that you cannot unsee? And I hope in reading that book, I hope there are many, but I hope every presentation I give, every book that is read, leads to one aha that my audience cannot unsee.
That's amazing. I cannot wait to read it. I'm going to go straight to Amazon to pre-order my copy. And for those who are listening, that link for both Amazon and Barnes & Noble will be in the show notes. So as we wrap up, Amanda, as we look ahead, what gives you the most optimism about where design, manufacturing, and collaboration are headed?
I'm going to come back to something I've already mentioned, but I think it's a real positive for our industry, is that post-pandemic, in this world that we're living in right now, the average human being has never been more aware of how they feel in physical space. So I think this is just a really beautiful moment for our industry to step up and help the world navigate through work for what's next, because work influences everything else that we do, where we live, where we travel, how often we travel, where we learn, the experience our kids have growing up. So I think it's a really beautiful moment to make sure that we get some of the thoughtful voices from this industry that have been thinking about all of these topics long before the pandemic hit to the world stage to make sure that we're heard. And I love that for our industry.
Yes. Well, Amanda, you shared so many gems today. We went from talking about buying power 40 times, 140 times, depending on who we were talking about. You gave us a breakdown of really three main things that people need to be aware of in terms of balance in sales and marketing, the showing signs of maturity and decline, and humans being way more aware of their physical space. And I love to hear that because everybody is in an interior physical space right now. And you also gave us so many points of research that brands can really start to think about and move forward as they are shifting their perspective, doing change management, training their soft skills, and hopefully incorporating some more digital tools as well. We probably can continue to talk, but for now, thank you for being on my show. I truly appreciate you being here with me today.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. If today's episode sparked ideas, the next step is giving those ideas structure. Spec Ready is Thrive in Design's strategic framework designed to help interior product brands show up clearly, align marketing and sales, and become easier to specify without adding more noise or complexity. You can learn more at specready.co. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, be sure to follow the podcast and check out the show notes for links, resources, and ways to get in touch with our team. Thanks for listening to the Thrive in Design podcast. I'll see you next time.